Thank you, Warren, for agreeing to be on my podcast. I appreciate you taking the time out of your busy schedule. I know when we started setting this up, we had some scheduling issues. You, even with the corona lockdown, you are super busy with meetings and keeping yourself busy in other ways. So I don't know if you want to just tell us a little bit about yourself and then kind of give us a brief overview of what it is that you do.
Okay, my interest has always been in martial arts, and I've been doing martial arts since the age of 8. And just to put in a bit of perspective, that's almost 2.5 decades ago that I started.
Jeez, yeah.
And absolutely love it. And I say 2.5 decades ago, that's being conservative. That's when I took it seriously. So I'm a little bit older than most people think. But I love martial arts, and I've pretty much dabbled in most of them. And when I say dabbled, there are a few that I've obtained or Dan grades. Like I'm a 5th Dan in Kendo, 4th Dan in Taekwondo, the 2nd Dan in Hapkido. I'm a certified pressure point teacher. I'm a Krav Maga instructor, and I've done firearms training. So I've done quite a vast array of stuff. And again, it's because I just have a deep passion for martial arts in general. So what I did realize, though, is that after spending so many years in corporate, is that I wanted to change my passion into a business. And I would say back in 2008 is when I first sort of thought about, moving out of the corporate world into a full-time martial arts / self-defense business. And that for me was a big change, is that I never wanted to sort of mix my business with martial arts. I always felt martial arts should be pure. It should be in its purest form, and charging money was just totally against my ethics and morals. And so that's why I started the self-defense portion of it, where I could take certain portions of the martial arts that I learned and customize it or package it into a self-defense portion. I draw a very distinctive line between martial arts and self-defense, and one isn't the other unless it's taught in a very specific way. And I think a lot of schools teach martial arts and they say it's the traditional form of self-defense, but there's nothing such as a traditional form of self-defense. Crime is so dynamic; it changes every day. Criminals are intelligent; they change with the times, as do we. So it can't be a traditional sport. Things that worked 2,000 years ago in ancient Japan, where people bow to each other before getting into a fight, doesn't happen now. So I had to adapt my sort of version of self-defense to be more contemporary and more relevant for the modern world. So 2008 was when I first started the business. I only decided to go full-time into it probably about 6 years ago, which would make it about 2000 and what is it? Help me out, Chef.
It's 2020 now, so 2014?
2014. Yeah, 2014 is when I went full-time into my business, and I left my corporate job after 14 years of being corporate. Yeah. So
you were obviously in corporate, so I think looking into your background, you were kind of in the tech side. You worked for a telecommunication company. So, I mean, martial arts is completely different from what you were doing.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, I studied a BCom. I majored in information systems and marketing, and second in corporate finance. So very big, different sort of career path. And I think for me that was the big revelation. I think varsity was never a conscious thought. It was sort of, I finished school, what are you going to do? And you sort of do what your parents want you to do, and that's sort of get a degree, And my parents being obviously Asian, they wanted me either to be a doctor, accountant, and lawyer, the sort of the three.
Yeah.
I opted, and I actually tried my hand at actuarial science. I got into actuarial science, and after the first week of actuarial science, I was like, there's no way I'm going to keep up with this. It's too boring. So I sort of, and I say downgraded in all due respect to all the BCom students. I went from Science to a BCom, and I thought BCom was a great job, so that was much better suited for me. But yeah, studying IT and marketing was quite an eye-opener, and eventually ended up in a corporate finance company, and then, like you said, in telecoms actually. Started off as a systems administrator, worked all the way up to an IT manager, and eventually got bought up by a big corporate, a big red telecommunications corporate, I won't say who. And I was there for 14 years as in various roles, project management for photo management. So very different from what I'm doing now.
How did you get your defense? I think you were on Defense Unlimited first, and now you're warrenho.net. How did you start everything? Yes. Did you do kind of market research to identify a gap? Was it through a network that you saw an opportunity, or just not necessarily a network, but how did you identify the opportunity to actually start this as a business that was potentially going to earn cash?
Right. So I think back when I first envisaged Defense Unlimited, which is the company, so my company still runs, trading as warrenho.net. Warrenho.net is just really more the branding. But Defense Unlimited is the holding company. And when I first decided to do this, it was mainly because of a lot of, I wouldn't say a lot of market research, but it was various queries from people. They knew me and knew what I did, wanting me to teach self-defense. And then I think I had one big opportunity of pharmaceutical, and they basically wanted me to do a team building the one day. And to put it lightly, the amount of money they were going to pay me for one day was equivalent to my back then 1 month's worth of corporate work.
Jeez.
And I was like, hey, this is pretty good money. And if I could do this would be great. Now, back then, there weren't many players in the self-defense field. These days, every Tom, Dick, and Harry is offering self-defense workshops and courses. There's so many organizations that have opened up in the last 3 years, I would say. And some are very good, reputable places. And quite frankly, some I've never heard of, or they've converted from, they teach the traditional form of self-defense, which again, I have issues with. So back then, there wasn't much competition. And that was the whole point of me leaving corporate. There was a gap which I perceived, and if I could get at least one of those a month, I would have covered my corporate salary back then. Unfortunately, the economy did take a downturn, and because of more market players coming in, and perhaps also me as an entrepreneur not being familiar on the sort of the business side of being an entrepreneur, I sort of lost that opportunity right at the start. So that was a big learning curve for me, and so pay the price and trying to rebuild from what I learned there.
How long did it take you to actually show a profit? You obviously did show a profit because the company is still running. So you've been successful in terms that you've managed to keep it self-sustaining for the last 6 years. I know that you've got a young son as well. You're obviously married.
Yeah.
So you obviously were making enough money to sustain all of that. How long did it take you to get to that level?
Well, okay, so here's a disclaimer. I would like to think I'm married right. So my wife still runs the corporate. She has a corporate job and she gets the regular income. So we had discussed this prior to me leaving my job, and that was sort of the big discussion for our family, because the time that I told my wife I was resigning, she told me that she was pregnant. So it was sort of like a major decision. Yeah, it just sort of all happened at once. And we said, look, fine, as a new business, we expected not to be running a profit for the first couple of years, which it didn't. And even now, I think one of the things people don't sort of take into account is that you still have regular expenses. You have a mortgage, you have utilities, you have grocery bills, you have insurance. All those things still run. So thank goodness for my spouse, who was able to take on a lot of the load, and even to this day she still takes on a lot of the expenses, even though the business is turning not a huge profit, but something where it's above the line. For a long time it was making a loss for a long time. And I say a loss not from a business sense, but just trying to cover my basic expenses from a household perspective. Nothing beats a corporate salary, because it's steady. It's whether you're working or not, it's still there. And so unfortunately, it's only started to turn a profit at the beginning of this year, but that's a good sign.
And now we've got Corona. So how has it changed? How has your business changed? Because obviously there has to be a lot of adaptation in terms of the way business is done right now. I mean, if you look at the news, not a single other news item is available at this stage. The entire world is shut down. Everything is all about Corona, and everything has kind of had to move digital. So I do know that when we spoke last week, your kendo classes, you'd moved online. In terms of the self-defense stuff, and how do you work that online? Because I mean, self-defense is quite a hands-on type of industry, if you will. How are you coping with this need to move everything digital and the social distancing issues at the moment that we're experiencing?
Okay, good question. So I'm gonna break it into two. First, just on the traditional martial arts side, the kendo stuff. Yes, so we've essentially moved all our classes onto an online virtual platform. And when I say virtual platform is we meet 3 times a week, we train for an hour together. When I say train together, we do the warm-ups, we do the basic practice together. We obviously can't do the partner work
Yeah.
where we need to put on the arm and spar. That will come when we train again. But kendo is one of those things where you can self-cultivate a lot of your discipline and your technique at home by yourself. And that's like here in Japan. They don't train every day in a dojo. They train every day by themselves. And when they meet is when they sort of put all those techniques into practice. And, I think South Africans are sort of people that I've met anyway, they feel that you only do martial arts in the dojo.
Yeah.
Whereas it should become martial art is a lifestyle change. Is that every day you should be doing some kind of training that enhances your martial art, whether it's cardio, strength, fitness, or doing some basic skills training. And it's not just in the dojo. So kendo, for that son, we meet 3 times a week and we train together. We try to have as much as an interactive session as possible where we're still doing the counting together. We do the saburi together. Saburi is basic practice. And it actually is quite a really nice sort of a social environment. And I think what the coronavirus has taught us is that even though we're social distancing, it doesn't mean we can't still connect with each other. And just by being in our virtual dojo, we connect with each other. Whether it's just seeing someone on the screen, interacting with them like that. Technology allows us to still connect even though we're distant. It's quite a nice conundrum we have there. On the self-defense stuff, yes, absolutely. So you hit the nail on the head of what majority of people think about self-defense. And this is where sort of the way that I teach self-defense and what I do with my methodology, I'm trying to change the way you think about it. Most people only think self-defense in terms of kicking and punching. But for me, kicking and punching is the absolute last resort that you should go to. It's not the absolute last resort, but it's one of the options that you have. There is so many options, and most people are familiar with the whole term fight or flight, where they say, either fight or you run away. Yes, those are 2 options. I've got another 2 options as well, which I teach in the self-defense training. And self-defense for me is greater than just kicking and punching. Yes, if you're going to run, you're going to make that decision. You're going to run, fine. But there are 3 other ones as well. The one could be, for instance, what I call freeze. Okay, so most people are familiar with freezing in self-defense, where they freeze out of fear. But it can also be a conscious decision where you freeze because you have to comply with the perpetrator. The guy's got a gun to your head, who's holding your family hostage. You're not going to try anything stupid. You're not going to run and leave your family behind. Therefore, comply. Most of the times, most criminals just want your stuff. Give it to them, they can go on. But that's a conscious decision that part of the self-defense training teaches you. Okay?
Yeah.
Then the other 2, which the one I'll share with you, the one is called flip out. And it's not what you think about where you lose your mind, you're someone's trying to mug me. The flip out is if you have any personal protection tools. So be it a pepper spray, a tactical baton, you have a knife, you have a firearm. Flip it out, bring it out, use it as a psychological tool. Say, listen, I've got pepper spray, come in closer, I will spray you. Now, believe it or not, that rehearsed line and that way of thinking takes practice. You have to practice that to be able to use it. It's not engaging physically with the person, but at the same time, you need to engage verbally with dialogue with the person. If you haven't practiced that, the idea is that when you need it under duress, under pressure, it's going to come out like, it's going to come out all messed up and you'll miss the point of that whole flip out option. The last one, the adapt strategy, is what I call a high-level strategy. It's a negotiation tool. One of them is, for instance, posturing. Right? I can posture up. Hey, listen, I'm Asian. You really want to try to make me? I will kick your ass. I have kung fu in my blood. Right? Posturing up. Right?
Yeah.
But at the same time, I can posture down. Hey, listen, I'm a young father. I have a 5-year-old. I just want to grow old with my son, see my grandkids. I posture down. Those kind of methodologies or those negotiation tactics takes practice. And again, it's self-defense. But again, a lot of the schools only teach you kicking and punching. So my sort of my response to self-defense is a lot wider. But the idea is it's got to be practiced, it's got to be rehearsed, it's got to be something that you're comfortable with. And more importantly, it's got to answer your primary question. And I say primary question because that's the foundation of your self-defense. What are you willing to fight, die, and kill for? If you can honestly tell me what it is right now, then yes, that's self-defense. Make a logical decision now rather than an emotional decision at the time that it happens. So an example is road rage. Most people give in to the emotional response of someone cutting in front of them. But they don't ask the question, is this something worth fighting, dying, and killing for? And then they sort of, and they're chasing this guy down the road, then they catch it. It's sort of like, what do you do with it now? You guys going to get out and have a bit of a boxing match? Someone might end up injured or dead in a road rage incident. A guy accidentally shoots the person, takes him to the hospital, and turned himself in. That's happened last year, November, December. It was exactly that incident. And that's road rage, giving into emotional decisions rather than having a rational, logical decision that you've made.
I think a lot of people kind of equate the physical aspect of self-defense to martial arts. But what a lot of people don't realize, I think, is that martial arts is any kind of fighting you do in a martial art, in a tournament, is all very controlled. There's rules in place, and in terms of self-defense, there are no rules. So like you say, what you have at your disposal in terms of self-defense is quite different from a martial arts tournament fighting in a ring setup. So I thank you for clarifying that. I think that's a popular misconception.
Absolutely, and it's not a bad misconception. There are, like I said, there are some martial arts that really do have the whole self-defense ethos at the foundation of the martial art. But the reality is, martial arts has evolved from what it was to what it is now. It's become an art form. It's a way of expressing yourself. Even Bruce Lee said it best, is that, martial arts should be a way to express yourself as freely as possible. And some people have taken it to the one extreme and others to the other side. So it allows interpretation in all spectrums, which is great.
It's something that a couple of my friends and I were chatting about in terms of the crime rates. We're obviously now in a lockdown situation and we're seeing a little bit of looting and that kind of thing. But we're quite concerned in terms of what's going to happen once the lockdown is lifted. What is your view in terms of what's going to happen with the crime rate? Because all of us are kind of expecting there to be a spike as things go back to normal.
Yeah, look, I think the perception out there is that crime has stopped, but I think the fact is it hasn't been reported on. I can use a personal example. Our complex alone, just prior to the lockdown, we had 3 attempted break-ins to our complex. 3 electric fences were cut. Thankfully, nothing happened of it. They tried to get in, but the alarms went off, and etc., etc. But and it wasn't reported purely for the fact that everybody's focus is now on the coronavirus. So there might be a misconception out there. I don't have enough data to say is there or isn't there crime happening out there. But the reality is the crime is still going to be there. It's just that once the lockdown and the sort of the focus is off that, it's going to look like it spikes because all of a sudden now the news guys are going to say, listen, well, we've got nothing else to report on. Let's report on the crime again. So that's the only reason. But trust me when I say it's probably still happening quite frequently. Stats like the stats that we have, something like 58 murders per day. Those are very abnormal stats, and for them to suddenly disappear is not possible. It's going to take years of rehabilitation and active policing from our side for it to be gone. I think the thing is, it will look like it spikes when the lockdown is removed. But the reality is it's just that it's going to be reported more after the lockdowns.
Yeah. You mentioned at the beginning of the chat you do Kyusho, Kendo, Kung Fu, Aido, Taekwondo, Tai Chi, Qigong. Like you say, you've done firearms training as well. A lot of people make the mistake of following a passion in terms of trying to turn a passion into something that they can make money off of. And it often falls flat because once a passion is a job, it's a job and you're relying on that for money. So how has your transition from being super passionate translated into a money generating business? Have you retained the passion that you had for all the stuff that you were doing prior to having to rely on it for money?
Right. Okay. So I did mention also, at one stage I didn't want to charge to teach martial arts because that would sort of detract from my passion, from the purity of the martial arts. And I think for me that thinking was a big hampering block to make my business flourish. And maybe just to sort of correct myself, I think following your passion is 1/3 of the way. I think you've got to number one, love what you do, and that's the passion part. But at the same time, you also got to be good at it. You've got to have a flair. You've got to have the ability to be able to do what you're passionate about. It's pointless for me saying, I've got a passion for flying but I have no freaking clue how to fly a plane.
Yeah.
Right? So there's a difference there, that if I can teach it with my passion, with, and I love it and I'm good at it, that's the second part. And the third part is there's got to be a need for it. There's got to be something which the market wants, they want what I have to offer. The Japanese have a nice term, it's called Ikigai. I don't know if you ever
Yes, yeah, I'm aware of the term, yeah. But maybe, I don't know if you want to just explain it for the audience.
Ikigai is basically the three concepts we speak about is, what do you love? What is your passion? What is it that you're good at? All right. And then the third part, which is what is it that the market wants? And it's those overlaps of all three where sort of the opportunity lies for a business, number one, and obviously where people will strive and sort of grow. And that for me, like I said, it was very elusive at first because I love teaching. I didn't want to charge money for it, even though people would want me to. And it was that sort of limiting belief that, I want to teach, but I don't want money for it. That sort of prevented me from sort of flourishing as a teacher and as a martial arts teacher and as a business. But once I accepted that, I think I could see the results, and especially the last 3 months prior to the coronavirus, is that I still teach my heart out with passion in the classes that I had. And I was getting quite a lot of students, a lot of traction, and then I was still enjoying it. I get my joy from teaching, not from the money. The money is a secondary as such. And my resentment at one stage is that I was teaching with so much passion, but I wasn't being paid for it. And I've still got bills. I still had to drive to the dojo. I didn't get any money for it. And then when I accepted that, listen, it's okay to get money for something that I'm passionate about, because the reality was that I had to change my belief that what I had to offer was of value and that people were willing to pay me for that value. And once I accepted that, it was okay. So I think that for me was a big changing point in my life and in my business as well.
Well, I've already gone through all the stuff that you do, and it kind of goes into my next question in terms of there's a lot of conflicting information about providing a niche product versus diversifying your offering so that you are tapping into more than just one market. On one hand, obviously your growth is limited if you niche too much, but on the other, if you diversify too much, you become kind of run-of-the-mill and you're offering the same thing as everyone else. So how have you kind of structured your offering to niche but diversify at the same time?
I sort of had to really dig deep about 6 to 12 months ago in terms of answering that question. Do I diversify to a point where some of the things I was doing I wasn't even interested in, or do I stay niched in terms of where I am? And when the first part of 12 months ago, I had looked at doing, just keep myself afloat. Business was bad from a self-defense perspective, and I was like, maybe I need to go back into corporate and do a sort of a project management part-time, or I had one stage also thought about opening a branding business where we do corporate branding. And, I started dabbling in all of that, but it started taking a lot of energy. Our energy is only limited. And it was a choice between, listen, I can put 100% energy into my martial arts business, or I can split it into half of this and half into project management and a little bit into sort of dabbling onto the corporate branding. What I decided, and some people might have a different views, that I wanted to keep all my energy within the same sphere that I'm passionate about and that I loved, and that was the martial arts. And that's where sort of warrenho.net came along, is that I still wanted to do self-defense, but I love the traditional martial arts stuff. And I also like sort of coaching people in terms of helping them what I call their unlocking their potential. So I wanted to do a coaching program as well, which would be a later phase. And hence sort of the three branches of what my business does now is I do the traditional martial arts, which is kendo and iaido. I do the self-defense stuff, which is sort of an amalgamation of all the more practical stuff of self-defense and offer it to corporate as team buildings. And then there's going to be the online coaching stuff, which is still to come.
Okay.
But those all sort of fell in line of what I was passionate about, I felt I was reasonably good at, and it was something which I felt the market would be willing to pay me for. And that was keeping it within that sphere of nicheness, still within the martial arts, self-defense, personal development perspective. So I've forgone all the other ideas of project management and corporate branding and whatever else I sort of dabbled in at that stage.
Okay, I ask purely for selfish reasons because I I have the opportunity to look at developing an app. I came up with an idea. To cut a long story short, the idea was not necessarily going to be lucrative in terms of being able to sustain itself financially. And we kind of threw a couple of other ideas around, and well, we came up between the people on the call. We came up with a great idea that looked like it was going to be very financially lucrative, but it just didn't get my blood pumping, like, and I don't know in terms of doing, following the money. I don't know if that's necessarily the right way forward. If you're not invested in something on on an emotional level, I think you're not really going to get any benefit out of it if you're just chasing the money.
Well, absolutely. And, I think back on my corporate days where, I was earning a really good salary. If I think back then of what I was earning, I was earning a really good salary for doing minimal work. And I hope none of my ex-bosses hear me say this. But, my typical day back in corporate day would be I would get to work at 9, have breakfast with a friend till about 10:30, check my mail for half an hour. Then I'd go for brunch and lunch, go to gym, come back to the office, check my mail and check on my staff, and then go home by 4. And that would, any given person, they'd be like, geez, man, that's like ideal. But it was soul destroying because it was work, just going there every day. And even though I was getting a paycheck, it was like, why am I doing this? This is like killing me.
Yeah.
This is like soul destroying. All I'm doing every day is push papers. I had a staff of 13 people. I was telling them what to do. I was signing off, and, not to sound more important, but I was signing off like documents that said, this project's going to cost 50,000, this one's going to cost 2.4 million. I was signing off with like paper money, really asking myself, is this really what I want to do for the rest of my life? And that was one of the turning points when I realized that, listen, I'm wasting my life here. I'd rather do something I'm totally passionate about and live a life worth living for. Yeah. And that's when I decided to sort of leave the corporate world. And it's the same for you. When you look at your opportunities, you got to understand that you only have so much time and so much energy left for you and for your other stuff. Do you really want to take it away from that? Would you rather give 100% into what you really love, what you know you're good at, and where you can improve as well? And again, something which there is a potential market for it. That was sort of part of my thinking. So I hope it helps.
Yes. Yeah, thanks for that. It does.
Yeah.
It helps clarify one's thinking, I think, when you hear it coming from other people. Because I think on I don't know if you want to call it a primal level, that that's the right decision. But at the end of the day, we all have to make money. And the allure of trying to do something just purely for the sake of making money, it's difficult to turn that down, especially when you've said yourself, the business kind of went through a slump and all that kind of thing. So what do you do to just keep things running so that you can continue pursuing it? But like you say, the amount of energy that it needs kind of is a massive roadblock for me. But
you know what, I think it's also something to realize as well. As much as I talk and I preach about the Ikigai, is yes, there are still your basic needs that you need to uphold, whether it's food, shelter, relationships, your basic Maslow's hierarchy of needs teaches us your basic needs, right? I can relate. I'll give you a quick story, a couple of years ago where, business wasn't good at all. I was not bringing in any income. And it was so desperate that I was like, okay, I'll do anything. And just so happened that there was a sort of a casting call for sort of background TV work and all of that. So I was even doing that kind of stuff where it was pathetic. It was like $200-300 a day, right? Before tax. I was even going for that. That's how desperate I was just to get some kind of cash going,
Yeah.
And it would be a decision like, do I drive there? Because just driving there would cost me $50 and I'm going to get more than $50 just to be able to sort of show some kind of profit where it was that desperate at one stage. And it just so happened that one of these things I auditioned for happened to be a role for sort of like it's a now defunct Cinemax TV series called Warrior. And I was one of the background extras. That turned out quite nicely because not only did I get to be part of this TV series, but it was sort of based on Bruce Lee's work.
Oh, cool.
I got to train with some exceptional martial artists. So we were paid to actually train, and they flew us to Cape Town, and it was decent money. The only bad thing about it was that it was based in Cape Town. So I had to be away from my family for almost 6 weeks, which was very difficult, especially with a young son. And, my wife's still trying to keep up with her job and pay the bills. So not being at home really left me quite a blow. It was like, I had to make a decision. It was sort of like, well, I'm making a little bit of money, but it's not much. And I'm away from my family, but I'm getting to do something that I never thought I'd do, which is like being on a TV series, which Bruce Lee had envisaged, and I'm getting to train with some amazing martial artists. So, yeah, sometimes those decisions are tough, but you need to make a call.
Yeah. We've kind of covered this a little bit already in terms of automation. Automation has been a buzzword for the last while as companies look to reduce overhead costs. And now with the COVID-19 lockdown, many people have turned to the digital world to try and keep their businesses afloat. How do you see business in general changing due to this? There seems to be a kind of split that half people think that it's going to go back to normal. The other half thinks that this is going to change everything and business as we know it is going to have changed once this is all over. I'd like to get your input and your opinion on how you think this is going to change.
Well, I think I can only really speak from my business perspective, right? I think some businesses still require very much a hands-on, in-the-face kind of sort of delivery. I'm in the service delivery. I teach martial arts, so I have to be at one stage face-to-face with a person. Whether it's in a dojo or online, I have to be face-to-face with a person. So from that sense, I think the appeal is still that we have a sort of a real-time interaction with each other, and being in each other's physical presence does help, but it doesn't mean that we can't use technology to enhance it like we are now. We have Zoom and we have all these wonderful apps which will allow us to sort of do it online. But there will come to a point where it just becomes oversaturated. I think so many people have gone online now. One of my students actually said to me, listen, I can't do any more Zoom sessions because, she homeschools the kids. The kids are online pretty much, from 8 until about 5, and she wants the kids just to have less screen time. It doesn't help with all this modern technology. So her decision was, listen, we're not going to do any more Zoom sessions after 5, which unfortunately was my class, was at 6:30. So they won't be joining me on the online session. But she said, once we start, obviously, our regular classes, she'll be back. So some people want to have that physical interaction, or sort of, when you say real interaction with the person. And that's where I think businesses will sort of realize is what businesses can go online and which ones can't. Some businesses at this time are flourishing. They are doing phenomenally well, whereas others where you need to, if you rely face-to-face, just doesn't work as well. So businesses will have to adapt. I think things like handshaking, or I think people are going to become more wary. One of my sales coaches actually said that, this is actually the beginning of the death of the handshake, where people actually engaged. And who knows, they might go into, for a long time, Asia, you never shook hands with people, you bow to them. Touching hands was almost sort of taboo. So it might come to a point where we revert back to that more Confucian kind of lifestyle and business meeting like. I think also meetings, I think people realize that how much time is wasted actually sitting in an actual meeting, whereas if you're in a Zoom session, you've only got an hour, you've only got 30 minutes, because there's so much more you can actually fit in. So yeah, it definitely will change, but I think it depends on which industry and which businesses you're in.
I do think that this is potentially the death of the communal office. I think that with people working from home, it's actually the perfect case study now to prove that it can be done. There's no reason these days, well, in my opinion, that you need to get an entire workforce underneath the same roof in order to accomplish something.
Absolutely.
But then again, it also comes down to the individual workers, in terms of work ethic and how reliable they are to actually sit at home and do their work rather than messing around and, just doing the bare minimum.
Yeah, on that note as well, I'm not a human behavioralist, but I think there's something to be said as well about sitting at home by yourself. And I know this because as an entrepreneur for the first 2 years, I was pretty much sitting at home and going from an office of like thousands of people, and I had my own sort of my group of 13 plus me 14, and all of a sudden just working by yourself. Is that, yes, you have to have discipline, number one. And number two, the reality is you get lonely sitting in front of a computer. You yearn for human interaction. If it's just someone present in the room or someone to have a cup of coffee, or just someone you can sort of engage physically with. Again, I'm not a human behaviorist guy, but for me, when I was an entrepreneur, that was a big thing for me as well.
Humans are social animals, and I'm quite introverted, and I find social interaction difficult, but working from home, it does drive you slightly crazy, even though I do prefer it to being in an office, especially an open plan office. I found that absolutely terrible, but you do have to get out. I don't think it's necessarily going to kill face-to-face interactions, this working digitally, but I do think that the amount of interaction is going to probably change. It's still important to have that face-to-face contact for your own sanity.
I just observed for myself and my wife, because my wife's here, right? The fact that if we have to go to the office, you have to make an effort to like brush your teeth, comb your hair, put on some decent clothing. And I think both you and I are like introverted. Even though we have to go out, we still want to be presentable. And that sort of accounts for a lot in terms of just our general self-esteem. If we look good, we'll feel a bit better about ourselves. But the fact that we're behind a screen, I mean, I'm wearing a shirt now that's full of holes, the shoes on, and people pants. I'm pretty much a slob at the moment. But the fact is, if I had to go out, I would obviously put on my decent clothing and maybe some deodorant, maybe, and comb my hair. But that act of actually grooming myself makes me feel good, and it's not for anyone else other than for me to make myself feel better. And I think self-esteem is a big thing in terms of confidence, being productive, good mental health, etc., etc.
On that note, I'd like to just maybe end off with a quick fire round.
Okay.
So the first question: define success.
Oh, hold on. Success is a self-defining one. I think whatever your definition of success is, you've got to be comfortable with it, but you've got to be honest with yourself as well, okay? So success is what you define for yourself, and you've got to be comfortable that it is what success means to you. So it's very individualized.
Okay. How do you usually start your day?
I'm a physical training guy. So I have to have some kind of training in the morning, or before 12. So whether it's a bit of yoga, a bit of stretching, or I do strength and conditioning with an online gym at the moment, or some training, I have to do something physical, walking the dogs. So for me, that's a big contributing factor for the rest of my day. If I don't have that, then I'm cranky for the rest of the day.
What do you do when you're not working on your business?
Look, I'm a family man as well. So my family is very important to me, especially my son. He's 5, so he takes a lot of time. So when I do have free time, it's normally spent with him doing stuff, or we try to do things as a family. So him and his mother, my wife, we all try to do something as a family. Whether we're building, painting, we're playing Monopoly, playing Uno. Just weekend alone, we were building a rocket jet for him out of boxes. So that was cool. Yeah, so it's doing family stuff.
Cool. What do you rely on for continued learning?
So variety. I think the majority at the moment is I have 2 coaches / mentors. Specifically, there are sales mentors, but I see that sales encompasses both the inner and outer game, as they put it. It's called the yin yang of sales. So they are hugely inspirational and important for my personal development. And then books. I have a lot of books and research articles. Well, not say research articles. Books on martial arts, Kendo specifically, and the Ido, as I'm doing that as well now. And then online resources. I think there's a lot of online resources specifically again for Kendo that I look at and I read and I research. Yeah, so all 3 of those things.
Okay,
people,
cool.
Books and online material.
Cool. If you could impart one piece of advice on how to build a successful business or a life in general, I'll leave that open to your own interpretation. What would it be?
Okay, so so part of my coaching program, and I call it the sort of lifestyle of a warrior. There were 3 principles that I sort of, for myself, I defined, and I found that if you can build this foundation, everything else will be fine. And it's 3 pillars, which I call self-confidence, resilience, and discipline. And those 3 things in that combination was essential for building up your foundation. So self-confidence, obviously, building a bit of confidence in yourself, getting started and motivated, that's important. Resilience, when you get knocked down, getting back up and keep on going. And the last one, which is an important one, is discipline. Even when the going gets tough, you keep doing it over and over again. And that's the discipline. So those 3 pillars for me are foundation, not only to martial arts, but for me is in my life, in my personal development.
That's awesome. That brings us to the end. Where can people find you online?
Yeah, so everything, if you go to warrenho.net, so www.warrenho.net, links to all my other self-defense martial arts and coaching stuff is on there, and all the links to social media as well. So I do run an Instagram and Facebook, warrenho.net as well. And links to my dojo and links to my self-defense trainings all on that as well.
Okay, fantastic. I'll include that in the show notes so that people have got a link that they can just click on to get through to you.
Perfect. Thanks, Megan. I really appreciate that.
I appreciate you taking the time to chat to me.
No, thank you, Megan, and thanks for obviously inviting me to be part of your show. And of course, I hope it goes well, and everything else that you decide or not deciding to do goes well as well.
Awesome. Thanks, Warren. Follow the Business of Podcast on my website, megamillist.com, or wherever you get your podcasts. Subscribe to the YouTube channel @Megamillist. Connect with me on LinkedIn, Megan Darcy, MEGAND'Arcy. Chat soon.